Okay, what is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Student Podcast, episode 18. Today we've got an exciting episode. Today we've got Sana. She is a BA Honours Architecture graduate and a content creator. She's the founder of 2Scale, Grazing Gems, and the co-founder of the Mad Collective. Her work aims to empower the architecture community and explore the power of social media in creating a virtual community for creatives. So welcome, Sana.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Happy to have you here. So how are you working at the moment? What are you up to at the moment? Give us the lowdown, give us a bit more information on what you're up to.
So I recently started a new job at the start of the month. So I've been kind of working in the office, working from home now. And, just getting on with the blog. So we've got sort of weekly articles going out every Monday as usual. And I'm looking to get more of the community involved and get their stories and experiences out there. I'm, obviously part of the Mad Collective as well. So we're kind of busy planning our next symposiums and events and things. And just a couple of, side projects and stuff as well. So I'm working on a resource for sixth formers and college level students called the Architecture Agora. And I am sort of also working on a resource called Building an Archi Brain. So it's kind of a PDF style format thing about sort of productivity and ways to be better organized as a student and things like that. So quite busy at the moment,
Nice,
actually.
Yeah. About to say you're very active. How are you finding balancing all of that while working full time?
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, luckily I've kind of had a year to prepare in a sense. So, there was always the slight possibility that, I'd get a job and then what? So I've always kind of stay one step ahead and just, plan articles and things in advance and things like that. So it's not too bad actually, because now I'm pretty much used to it.
Yeah, nice. So how long have you been, so did you graduate this year or last year?
I graduated last year.
So how's it been for the past year, kind of trying to find your feet and obviously find a job or get yourself in the door with architecture?
Yeah, it's been pretty sort of a long journey and a bit of a roller coaster, but I think I got there in the end. And I mean, it was okay because I had the blog to kind of keep me going for a bit, and it was something to do alongside job hunting and stuff like that. And I had a fair amount of interviews and things, so I was constantly learning from that too. But I think reflecting back, it was in a way that me a year, because it allowed me to sort of build this platform and stuff like that. So yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, so obviously we've mentioned the fact that you've got a platform, you do these blogs. So the brand is called 2Scale. So what does the 2Scale brand aim to explore? We've obviously touched on you kind of try to aim to empower the architecture community. So
Right.
how does 2Scale aim to do that, and what kind of things do you do to kind of explore those things?
Yeah, so initially the blog was just, simply that, just a blog. It was a sort of way of getting across my ideas or tips and stuff for students studying architecture, whether that's in their first, second or third years. And I think over time, as my interest developed, and then as I got, talking to people actually in the community, sort of students and professionals, it sort of branched off into a load of things. So, it allowed me to kind of meet the other guys at the Mad Collective and put together this magazine publication as well. So I think now 2Scale is at a point where we've sort of got our hands into everything, and it could go any way really. So it's open for anything. I think right now I'm pretty big on collaboration. I think that's the way to go forward.
Yeah, collaboration is super important. I think it's something I push a lot myself in my universities and things. When I filmed a podcast yesterday as well, and the biggest thing that I kind of pushed about giving even advice for first year students is getting involved in things, being in the studio if you can. Obviously it's a little bit different with the coronavirus at the moment, but kind of encourage yourself to interact with people, interact with different types of people, different creative people. It's not just about interacting with architects, but it's also being interactive with graphic designers, illustrators, artists, filmmakers. Exactly. It's the whole thing. Everything kind of comes together as one. So you've obviously
Yeah, and you
made,
don't even, yeah, sorry, you don't even have to kind of stick to architecture in a way. You can sort
no,
of, it's just a starting point if you think about it. And if you're not sort of fully enjoying it, or you don't think it's the thing for you, then you can definitely sort of go into something else that interests you. So I think that's the good thing about architecture.
yeah, it's a good starting point, because when you're studying architecture, you're not just studying architecture, you are learning about history. You are obviously, the way you represent your work, you are going into kind of graphic communication, and you look at illustration. And I think architecture, because it's narrow, but it's very broad at the same time. It's unbelievably broad. It gives you the opportunity to go off on tangents and kind of test different routes. And I think that is, like you mentioned, a very good point of why studying architecture is actually so good, and it gives you so many opportunities to branch off. Because I know architects
Yeah.
or people that studied architecture that have gone into graphic design or
Yeah.
illustration, and kind of taken off on different routes, or they've even gone into property development and those kind of things. So it gives you the opportunity to branch off.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think even like stuff being online now, it shouldn't sort of have to, stop you from doing anything different. Because actually, in a way, you can actually be doing multiple things if you manage your time correctly.
Yeah, yeah, it's all
Yeah,
about routine and
yeah,
balance.
for sure.
So you've got this magazine here, which you've just mentioned. It's an absolutely fantastic magazine, and I think you've done really well to kind of put this together. What was the kind of idea behind the magazine, and what was the kind of thing in what was the thought process behind creating this kind of collaborative magazine? Because you don't just have architects in there; you have different people giving
hmm
advice from different fields. So, what was the idea behind the magazine?
Yeah, for sure. So it kind of sparked off a sort of small collaboration I did with Hamza from Two Worlds Design, and we did a kind of day in the life of a architecture student series on Instagram. And after that, we were kind of just talking about ways we could collaborate even further. And he sort of mentioned, why don't you do a magazine? And I said, haha, yeah, sure. And obviously it got me thinking, because whenever someone kind of gives me these ideas, I think on it for days. And the magazine, it kind of was just very very informal. I had like an open call for students and designers and anyone who wanted to work on this kind of project. And it all came together really nicely, because I think it was at a time where people were just about finishing their university sort of years and stuff like that, and deadlines were kind of over. But the aim with the magazine was to kind of give the students a space where they can share, not just their interests, but bring something different to the table, essentially.
Mhm.
And I think the fact that the collaborators were sort of from around the world made it even better, because we had sort of different ideas and different, it opened up sort of different avenues for me as well about stuff that I didn't even know about. So I think that was really interesting to see. And yeah, it worked out really well, I think.
Yeah, it was really good. It's interesting to see all these different kinds of people come together in one kind of space. And I guess that's the whole reason why we're using social media as this kind of platform to create the architecture community. Do you feel like in your time at university, do you think there was a lack of the studio culture in this kind of community that you're kind of pushing through your brand and through social media at the moment?
Um, I'm not sure completely, because to be honest, at uni, I wasn't sort of very social anyway. I
Yeah.
was always kind of the one going back home and doing work and stuff. But, there would be times where I'd sit in the studio and just bounce ideas off other people and stuff. But I think it's more about kind of the disconnect between, say, one architecture school to another, which I felt, because I didn't have any kind of friends going and studying architecture anywhere, so I didn't really know of architecture outside of my university, you could say. But I think, yeah, I think the studio culture will start to adapt, really, depending on how this year goes.
It kind of has to adapt now. We're in a position where we're obviously all working remotely. You're working remotely at the moment. I'm working remotely at the moment. And it's obviously, there is this kind of disconnect now more prominently
Mm.
than ever, where we don't have the opportunity to interact with people face to face, and it's obviously a little bit different in creating a community from being at home. But that's why I find people like you and you doing the Mad Collective and those kind of things are really important in kind of creating this architecture community. So what do you think is currently missing within the architecture community, and how do you feel like things like 2Scale and Mad Collective can kind of bring together the community a little bit better?
Yeah, I think, in terms of the architecture community, I think right now there's kind of this unspoken sort of bond between artists. So we all kind of know each other, know of each other.
Yeah.
And, that's not restricted to just the UK. And I think in that way, we're also kind of creating content that overlaps in some way too. So, some people have strengths in sort of educational areas, others have strengths in, being relatable to students and stuff like that. So I think there needs to be, and I'm hoping there will be, a platform or a kind of group where we can kind of work together on that and collaborate. So that is something that I have been working on behalf of the Mad Collective, because the Mad Collective was initially, Alvin's idea was to kind of get together content creators and sort of see what happens when we all come together, because you have all these amazing collectives like that are sort of female based, or they have their own sort of unique strengths. But I think the fact that it's kind of the first one where all these content creators are coming together and actually putting on a symposium, for example, or putting on different events. So I think I think that sense of sort of collaboration is really missing at the moment. So
Yeah, so I think the important thing as well is that you're not only just sharing experiences, education. Some people might be really kind of know-how in coding, because I know she did a symposium recently about coding. Some people might be really good in developing a routine and discussing the more relatable sides of studying. But then at the same time, people have skills in graphically representing their work on Instagram. People have editing skills on YouTube. And so you're not actually just combining these educations and the experiences between people, but you're also actually combining the skills between people as well, in representing different ways of, or finding different ways to represent work and to kind of reach out to people. Because that's something that I found with, even with my work, I began to kind of bring in a lot more film into my projects and understanding how I could actually represent work as a film. But I didn't actually, before third year, I didn't even think that that was even a possibility of something you could do and have a kind of test in those crossovers. So when did you kind of realize that there was this chance to collaborate with people and have these crossovers with artists and people that could do coding or mechanics, and then filmmakers? And when did you find there was a moment where you could actually collaborate with these kind of people?
I think it was sort of, on Instagram, I'm constantly looking for new pages and new people who are doing something really interesting in the architecture community. So I was just kind of thinking about how, sort of there's this one post on, educational side of architecture, and this other page has got the same similar thing. But if these two pages came together, for example, then they could create something that's useful, and they can collaborate and share ideas and knowledge and stuff like that. And so there wasn't sort of a turning point, but it was kind of an idea in the back of my mind anyway, because of how the Mad Collective came about.
And do you think social media could actually help in creating this community, or do you think that it could actually break apart the community and people spending too much time looking on social media and not actually having the opportunity to be able to get out there and meet people and actually create these actually real relationships, I guess? So
I think, absolutely. I think that social media can help sort of bring the Archi community together. And the fact that, things like universities and stuff are already going virtual, it means that some students will kind of thrive off that, but some students might be at a disadvantage because they might not have access to everything that their university kind of tells them to have access to. And but I think the fact that, people like you and me are on social media, we're kind of giving our opinions, not actually sort of teaching or
Yeah.
imposing opinions and stuff like that. We're kind of just giving it from our perspective. I think we can step in and provide that extra bit level of help, which is, you know, whether that's from our own expertise or just redirecting it and saying, you know, well, I don't know how to do this, but, you know, Tom knows how to do that. Tom can advise you better on something like that, for example. So it's kind of like an addition to university in a sense, if you think about it. So I don't think people should kind of see it in a negative way, really.
Yeah, because I think the important thing with creating content is you kind of got that fine line between like forcing information onto people, but then also providing experience. And I think actually providing experience and providing relatability to people is actually a lot more powerful than just telling people information, just giving people information. It's important for someone to sit down and actually think, oh yeah, I actually thought about that today, or I felt that way as I was doing this bit of work, and they can kind of relate and they instantly have this kind of connection with the content creator. So I think it's important to, yeah, sorry, Karen.
Go ahead.
So I think it's important to find that balance. troubles of Zoom calls. Yeah, I think it's important to find that balance between providing education but also providing experience. And I sometimes think that even the experience side of things is a lot more important, and people can actually find that information a lot more useful.
Yeah. And, you know, it doesn't even have to be kind of a one-way thing, because, like, for example, a couple of months ago, I was trying to learn Rhino and SketchUp and things. And so I was constantly posting about it and saying, you know, I'm not sort of an expert in it, obviously. And, you know, there were people stepping forward and saying, you know, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And those were all coming from the community and coming from students who had the experience. And it was just a case of me sort of resharing that and saying, okay, this is what I've learned. Maybe you could do the same, or maybe you can sort of learn from my mistakes. So yeah, it's sort of, the thing is that us as content creators, we kind of rely on the community in a sense. So without them, we wouldn't really be creating content, if you think about it. So
we wouldn't have an audience essentially. So you obviously create content now. How did you think you were going to be creating content when you were studying your architecture? How did you end up falling into the realm of content creation? Because obviously it's not drastically different between studying architecture, but it's obviously like an add-on, and it is different. So how did you find yourself creating content after studying your BA?
Well, I always kind of had it in the back of my mind to start know what about, and it wasn't sort of meant to, it was just, the idea was just simply to have a blog. And then it was kind of, my mindset at that point was, you know, whoever reads it, whoever doesn't. It doesn't really sort of affect anything in a sense. But I think over the past year it's kind of grown, and, you know, it's not just me, it's actually guests who have, you know, put the time in and sort of shared their experiences as well, that I think would be valuable to other people. So yeah, I think also the fact that Instagram is kind of great in the sense that you can, you know, connect with people, whether that's you know, other students or even professionals. So I think that's also opened up sort of a different kind of networking side to things too. And I think that's kind of how I sort of stepped into content creating in a sense.
Nice. So throughout your BA, did you find there was opportunities to begin to start creating content, and did you feel like you wanted to share your experiences, or was it just one of those things where you just wanted to start kind of writing and talking about your experiences? And just, I think the important thing is when you start creating content, it's not, sometimes it doesn't have to be you want to kind of impact thousands of people. Sometimes you just want to write down what you've had on your mind or what you've done for the week, and you just kind of get that down, even as like a stress reliever. And so how did you find that when you started creating the content? Did you think that you would get into a position where you are now, where you're actually kind of impacting a large group of people, and you're getting involved with these other students and creatives that are actually doing a fantastic job in the community?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think that was totally unexpected in a sense. But I think you're right in a sense that the blog did kind of start out to be that kind of archive just for me, because you know, I was really lucky to have the tutors that I did, and they taught me a lot throughout my BA. And I like often used to think that, you know, if there were just kind of a place where not just me but everyone else can kind of learn these things too, then that would be really cool. And then obviously it kind of sort of grew from there. But yeah, I think it was pretty unexpected in a sense.
But it's one of those things with social media that you never go into it thinking this is going to be big or this is going to actually kind of take off. You just begin doing things you enjoy, and I think that's important. When people go into creating content, they kind of force, or they're kind of looking to be famous, or they're looking to kind of get messages off people and getting DMs and kind of getting involved with people. But essentially it grows much more naturally when you're actually just enjoying the content you're making, and it's actually a lot more sustainable. And you've now found yourself in a position where you can actually create content that people find useful, and you can collaborate with these kinds of people because you started off on that basis that you just want to create that content because you enjoy it. And that is kind of what you're going through at that period of your life. So I think we'll dive into a bit of a Q&A. I've got some questions here from some people. I've picked out some good ones, but we'll try and ramble on. The first question is, I've noticed this on your Instagram a lot, and I thought you could go into some detail about this. What is Notion, and how does this help your workflow? Because I know you're a big fan of Notion, and you preach it a lot on your Instagram. So if you could kind of describe what Notion is and kind of how you find it helpful with your work.
So Notion is essentially an online sort of workspace tool, and you can think of it as the thing that you sort of relate to. But Notion is essentially, it's kind of different in a way because it has all these amazing features and it's free, essentially. That's the sort of big plus point about it. And I started using Notion months ago now, and I've been loving it since. I've been trying to get everyone onto Notion. And I think the fact that it's just something to keep you organized in a sense. So it doesn't even have to be really complicated. You can just be sort of a task list. And I think especially for architecture students, that can be really vital in sort of organizing the different design aspects or your dissertations and stuff. And I think, if I had it during that time, then I would have been way more organized as well.
Yeah. Would you be upset if I told you I've never actually gone onto Notion? I've never actually looked at it. Which I feel bad because I feel like I need to.
Tom, I'll get you onto Notion. Don't worry.
Well, I feel like after this, I'm actually going to have to get myself set up because I'm a little bit, like you mentioned, I'm a little bit disorganized at the moment. I think with the whole starting a job and the kind of changing, I guess, routine and changing atmosphere and environment, it's obviously kind of thrown me off a little bit recently. And I think it's important to kind of have that regiment and that organization. And I think something like Notion is obviously a fantastic way for you to organize, because obviously I bang on about routine, planning, scheduling all the time on my videos because I think it's very often overlooked and people kind of think, I'll just do the work tomorrow or whatever. But I think planning, scheduling is probably one of the most important things to get you through university. And when I started university, I didn't really plan or schedule. And as I've gone through university, I've kind of realized the importance in that and how much more successful you can be and how much more productive you can be in creating kind of a balanced lifestyle, as well as getting on with the work and everything.
Yeah, and it's actually really good for even sort of content creating as well. It kind of keeps everything in one place, and if you need to share stuff, then you can do so. So for the Mad Collective, we use Notion, and it's really good. Like, we can have sort of all these ideas just in one place, and it won't go anywhere, and we can kind of keep updating it and keep building it. So definitely get onto it.
So is it like a platform where you could add information, then someone else has got access to that information as well?
Share your page and stuff on Notion, and people can, have access to it fully. But it's also really great for content creating as well, and you can share the pages publicly if you wanted to. So there's all kinds of different options and use for it.
Nice. I'm definitely gonna have to get myself involved in it. I feel like I'm missing out now.
Yeah.
I need to get myself set up. And if you listen to this, guys, definitely get onto Notion, because I think it's a platform that people need to use for sure. So how have you, do you
Hmm.
think your kind of route in creating content has helped you or kind of hindered your studies? Because this is quite an interesting question. Someone asked me this the other day, and I kind of thought, has making YouTube videos hindered my studies, or has it helped me? So I thought it'd be interesting if I kind of ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I started after graduating, but I think if I had been sort of exposed to other platforms and things on social media, it would have given me a lot more inspiration because, at university, you don't really get the time to kind of read around the subject. But I think if you kind of have all these visuals in front of you all the time, then it kind of can spark those ideas. You can find inspiration by looking at other people's projects as well. So even if that's kind of in a different university, it could still relate back to yours. So I don't think it could hinder it in a sense.
Yeah. And also I think
Yeah.
the kind of power in, like, people say to me like, where do you get inspiration from, or where do you get these kind of ideas from? And a lot of the time I just think to myself, where did I get that kind of idea from? And a lot of the time I just think, I've just been sat looking through Instagram for the past 2 hours, just scrolling through, looking at work, and
Yeah.
kind of like soaking up all these ideas and all the information. And I think people often overlook the power of looking through social media, looking through Pinterest, and actually looking at things to just kind of take in different types of work and different ways of representing work and different styles of work. And that also kind of, I think, emphasizes the fact of how important social media is becoming, in not just kind of providing information but for people, but also giving kind of inspiration and ideas for concepts and ideas and kind of routes to go down in different ways of representing your work. So I would literally, when I was at university, I'd literally sit there for hours just scrolling through Pinterest, like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And then
Yeah, same here.
I just kind of wait for something to happen. And a lot of the time it would happen. I'd think, oh, that'd be quite good, I'll do that. And then you kind of got an idea, and then you kind of look deeper into that piece of work, and then you'll find a bit of information about an architect or something. And I think that's where the power of
Right.
social media comes in, and the idea of kind of collaborating.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I think especially stuff like Pinterest is really useful because you can also save all these ideas in one place. So if you do need to come back to it, then you can, and you can use it not just as inspiration, but as references and precedents for your projects and stuff too.
Nice. So the next question we've got is, how have you found the transition from going from an undergraduate moving into a full-time job? What has that transition been like for you?
Yeah, I mean it's been okay. Obviously, I had quite a bit of time to kind of think about it and think how it would be and imagine and all that. But I think, in a sense, even if you do prepare like I've done, there's always a few sort of things that you just need to kind of get used to and settle in at work. And the best thing is kind of that you're learning something new every day in a sense. So even now, it's been what 4 weeks since I started working, and I'm like, even today I was learning something new about a detail or about how the way a project works. So yeah, it's just a matter of sort of learning stuff, I think.
So how did you prepare yourself? You say you've kind of spent the past year trying to
Yeah,
prepare yourself, because obviously you never really know exactly what you're going into. And I think that's, to be fair, I think that's
exactly.
the
Yeah.
beauty in kind of going into practice, is that you don't really know what you're going into. And I think that's quite interesting, kind of going into that challenge. So how did you try and prepare yourself going into a job?
Yeah, so like I said, you can't really sort of prepare yourself, but I think I spoke to a lot of people, like a lot of my friends and peers who had been working, and just talking to them about what their experience was like. But obviously you have to kind of realize that every practice is going to be different and their approach is going to be different. So I think it was sort of, one way that I was doing it was sort of brushing up on my software skills. So I was constantly trying to learn SketchUp or learn Revit because, even I think couple of months before I started, I kind of asked them for a task just to do. And they were really pleased with that. They said that sounds great. And it was just sort of simple SketchUp modeling. But I think it kind of got me in the gist of, okay, these guys are creating the SketchUp model in order to whatever for their projects. So yeah, I think if you can kind of ask ahead and just be kind of proactive in that way, then that can also kind of help you.
Yeah, and also you begin to kind of understand workflows and how different companies actually work in different workflows, and obviously the importance. And I'm not sure if you know too much about BIM, building information management or modeling, which has become like unbelievably important in kind of sharing information across practices. And a lot of the time when you work in quite big practices, it's not just them that are doing the drawings. There's probably 10, 15 other people that are actually, or 10, 15 other companies are actually involved as well. And that's one thing that I was kind of mind blown about since I've started working, is how many companies there are actually involved in a project and how all this information is actually being transferred and the levels of information to the softwares. And I've not always been a big software user. Like, I've used softwares in the past, and I've used Rhino at university. I've used Revit, used obviously AutoCAD, SketchUp, all of them. But then when you actually get into a professional environment and start to realize how these actually softwares are being used, it's quite mind-blowing, and there's like an unlimited amount of information
exactly
to learn about them.
Yeah, I think even with softwares at uni, no one kind of teaches you exactly how to use it. And then when you kind of get into practice, you see, oh, that tool actually has a function. And, you know, it is mind blowing, like you said. I think on my first day, they were kind of showing me a project and just going through the entire thing and saying, you know, these drawings are from this company, and then they carry it forward, and then the other company works on it and stuff like that. And it was really interesting to see. So I think, you know, as much as you can kind of prepare yourself on the software side, but it is kind of important. And I think it's kind of missing from education, is that, you know, we don't really know how projects work in university. But I think that's what the part one sort of, you know, year out is essentially about, kind of learning that.
Did you have experience whilst studying it in your BA?
No, I didn't. This is the first time. So I didn't get any work experience or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of really important to try and get as much experience as possible while studying, because you actually then, when you kind of have experience while studying, you kind of begin to think and tailor your thinking towards how would that actually work in practice and the kind of softwares you need in practice. And that was something that it was like a bit of a reality check when I actually went into practice, and I've realized that there's actually so many people working on the project, and it's quite regimented, and there's obviously all these processes behind everything that you do, and there's so many rules and everything. And then when I went back into university, you kind of understand that how to kind of tailor your work towards that kind of environment. So I would definitely advise people, if you are listening to this, to try and get as much experience as possible, even if it's just like a couple of weeks in a practice. It just gives you an idea of the kind of environment and the kind of changing kind of scenery and with the different types of softwares that people use. Is there any softwares that you would kind of encourage people to learn before going into practice?
I think some kind of modeling software, whether that's SketchUp or Rhino or 3ds Max. And then I would say kind of look into Revit, just kind of familiarize yourself with it. And then AutoCAD is just a must, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Revit, I think, is becoming even more important now. I didn't realize how kind of well used it is, because when I worked in practice 2 years ago, they told me that they don't employ anyone now who can't use Revit. So I kind of made the effort to try and learn as much of it as possible before going into practice, to kind of put myself in a position where I wasn't going right into the deep end as well. It's also another useful thing too, if you're getting prepared with software and stuff, you feel a lot more comfortable getting into the practice, and you're not really kind of stressing as much if you don't really know too much about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So you talk about wanting to be a content creator. Do you want your kind of career to go more into content creation, or do you want to kind of stay along the architecture path? Have you considered going down different routes and coming off of architecture, or is architecture still the kind of route that you want to go down?
I think so. I think obviously with the past year that I've kind of learned that, you know, you can't try and plan everything.
No.
You know, because I had this sort of vision that I would graduate and get a job, and then whatever happens after happens. But obviously I've had that whole kind of gap. And so I think in terms of, you know, going forward, I would like to kind of continue on with masters and probably get qualified at some point. But I'm kind of open to opportunities in a sense, like, because I've looked at, you know, it could be interesting to kind of teach at uni, or, you know, be a tutor for a year. Like, imagine that. So I'm not kind of closed off to anything, but yeah, but even sort of with skills in general, I've been able to kind of work as a social media manager and a graphic designer and stuff like that. So it's not kind of it's not a fixed route for me, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a good mentality to have, really, and kind of leaving yourself
Mm-hmm.
open for the possibilities of going down different routes. Because I think a lot of people are quite kind of like narrowing. Obviously, I don't want to be mean to anyone, but a lot of people are quite kind of narrow-minded, and they just say, no,
Yeah.
I just want to do this, and they kind of quite stubborn and not looking at certain things. But I think it is a really kind of good mindset to be able to think, no, I'm open for that to happen, or I'm open for change. And I think people kind of really need to embrace change and the opportunity. And I think the fact that you've kind of broadened your horizons and you've gone down, I saw you did some, used to do some freelance graphic design work as well. And obviously putting
Yeah,
together a
yeah.
magazine and studying architecture and going into an architecture practice. I think it's a kind of good way to study and kind of being open to learning things. And I think teaching would actually be quite fun, you know. I think I'd quite
Yeah.
enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I think so.
So I like
Yeah,
writing
it
down.
seems quite, yeah. Yeah, it seems quite appealing, I think, especially for content creators, because it's kind of what we do in a sense, but less official.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's also quite rewarding kind of passing on your own experiences and your own kind of learnings and kind of passing it on to people and really kind of seeing people evolve from the information you've kind of passed on, which is something I might go into teaching at some point,
Yeah.
become a lecturer or something. I think it'd be quite chilled as well. Be quite fun.
Yeah.
So I've got the final question here, which I thought I'd kind of ask you because I've just kind of been discussing it recently, and obviously at this stage, a lot of people are going into university. So what do you, if you could give some advice to first year students, kind of what advice would you give, or what kind of advice would you give for just students in general studying architecture?
Well, I think obviously since stuff is changing at uni and most of the content that they're consuming is online or pre-recorded, and those people aren't kind of too keen on that. I think it would just be a matter of taking it into your own hands and kind of upskilling and, you know, learning stuff like without being told. And I think that's really important. And it doesn't even have to be within architecture. If you're sort of, you know, doing sort of graphic designing stuff on the side or media and film, then that's fine. Like, I think there's always a chance for you to turn your hobby into a passion. And so I think I would really encourage students now to, you know, absolutely focus on your degree, but, you know, like be open to the fact that there are these different things that can influence it as well.
Yeah, nice. I think that was a solid bit of advice there. So
Cool.
thank you, Sarnaf. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed that, people, if you are listening. Thank you for coming on, Sarnaf. It's really interesting to kind of discuss the architecture community, because I think this is going to be something that is going to become pretty big in the future. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in the next few years, I think this is going to continue to develop. And I think Two Scale and the Mag Collective are going to be kind of leading people and leading platforms for the architecture community, which is actually going to be really exciting to see. And I'm obviously happy to be involved. So yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for coming on. Would you
Yeah,
like
thank
to
you.
plug yourself at all?
All right. Yeah. So if you want to find out more about the blog, then you can head to twoscaleblog.co.uk. Find us on Instagram. That's basically where I'm at all the time. And then, of course, check out the Mad Collective on Instagram, on YouTube, and on their website as well.
Spot on. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on, Sana. Thank you for listening to the #1 student podcast in the world, the Student Podcast. That is it for today. I'll see you next time. Peace.